to a local tattoo parlor operator under federal investigation. Small is not among those 5 players, and he tells the Lantern, quote, "I had sold my things, but it was just for the money. At that time in college, you're kind of struggling. We had 4 Big Ten rings. There was enough to go around. We have apartments, car notes, so you got things like that. And you look around and you're like, well, I got 4 of them. I can sell 1 or 2 and get some money to pay the rent." Also, today reported in the Lantern, a blog entry by former Buckeye basketball player Mark Titus, quote, "Any OSU student of the past 5 years could tell you that a lot of the football players drive nice cars. You'd have to be blind to not notice it." The reporting in the Lantern carries the bylines of Zack Meisel and James Oldham, and they join us today from Columbus. Gentlemen, it's good to have you here. Let's talk about Ray Small and the circumstances of this interview. James, when did you speak with him, and did you get a sense of why he decided to speak now?
Once again, thank you, Bob, for having us on the program. Zach and I are excited to be here again representing the Lantern. I spoke with Ray on Monday and then once again on Wednesday, just yesterday. I'm not sure why he chose now to speak with me. We sent requests out to numerous football players asking for more information about the situation and the scandals that the program has been involved in recently, and Ray answered pretty quickly. He was one of the first to do so, and again, I'm not sure why he chose now to speak with us, but he seemed very honest and very candid in his interview, and I'm glad he got in touch with us.
Zach, I saw you nodding. There are issues, and I've seen some tweets, and we're not sure if they're from actual verified accounts, but possibly some Buckeye football players bringing up, and we've heard this elsewhere, the disciplinary history that Small has. And so the issue of credibility arises. How did you and your editors assess his credibility on these?
Well, obviously, a lot of the players, current and some former, that graduated with Ray Small, they've almost abandoned him. And they call it a Buckeye brotherhood, and they've kind of banished Ray Small from that already. And so a lot of the reactions from some of the former players and whatnot are that, they dismiss it because they say Ray Small is incredible. But, Ray Small was in the doghouse for a long time, and it was almost as if we were expecting him to be kicked off the team at some point during his career at OSU, and he never was. So that's another way to look at it as, he really didn't have an axe to grind because, he had those axes to grind while he was in college and really didn't. So whether you want to dismiss it because he's not a credible source, whatever, but he really has no reason to make stuff up at this point.
I'm going to read you a quote you know well. It's in your reporting for our audience at home. This is relating to the rules issues, and these are the words of Ray Small, as quoted in your reporting. "They explain the rules to you, but as a kid, you're not really listening to all of them rules. You go out and people show you so much love, you don't even think about the rules. You're just like, oh, man, it's cool. You take it, and next thing you know, the NCAA is down your back." Zach, if you could summarize the atmosphere of things available, which according to his account, which according to Small, existed.
Well, I don't know that we know the extent of it, and because more and more reports keep coming out, and first it was just tattoos, and then it was cars, and now who knows. But one thing that is interesting to pile on what you just said, Malcolm Jenkins said that, a lot of players, they come up and they get into college and they've been given things their entire lives, and so they have a lack of self-control. And once you get to college, it's almost as if you have your eye on that prize, and you're not going to listen to, some 60-year-old compliance member whispering in your ear, "Hey, don't accept the gift," So I think it's self-control, and Jenkins said it's different for every player, really. But I think Ray Small, what he was saying is that, more players err on the side that he did rather than play it safe.
James, any reaction beyond what you've printed in today's paper from the school administration today?
From the administration, we haven't seen much response. We have had responses from some of the students on campus who have written us, some for the article and think that we did a good job, others who aren't so pleased with the article. There's also been a number of responses, as Zach mentioned, from some of the current and former players that discuss the brotherhood, but we haven't seen any responses from the administration.
I'm going to ask you to step out of character, James, from your objective reporting, just in a sentence, summarize the attitude on campus about this entire affair.
At this point, I think everyone's a little bit fed up with all of the news that's been coming out. You look in the newspaper and you watch on television, and it seems at least once a month there's a new report on things that have either just surfaced or things that are now being elaborated upon. And frankly, I think everyone on campus is just a little tired of it. I think they'd like to sort of move on from this scandal and this situation and hope there is an end to it in the near future.
Right. To most of the fans, I think you said 77 days until the Buckeyes meet with the Committee on Infractions, but the season starts about 3 weeks after that, and that date can't come soon enough to the members of Buckeye Nation.
No.
With Jim Tressel under a 5-game suspension, but only the game days is currently defined. That's the penalty, at least right now. Zack Meisel, James Oldham, you can read the reporting online at the Lantern at Ohio State, the Ohio State University. Gentlemen, thank you so much. So the drip of developments in the Tressel case continues. Let's now say hello to Bruce Hooley of FoxSportsOhio.com and to Bill Livingston, visiting us once again from the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Bill, what do these comments today from Ray Small that take us out of the community of just 5 players that would under NCAA scrutiny? What does this add to the entire Tressel stew that's stewing and bubbling at the moment?
Well, clearly it's not a good thing, but it's another thing Ohio State has to confront. At the same time, I do take a little bit of issue. You know, it's good reporting to go to the unhappy player, and I'm not knocking that. But Ray Small did have some disagreements with Tressel, and he was suspended for the biggest game of his life, the Rose Bowl. He was suspended many times for violation of team rules, and that's a code word usually for recreational drug use. I don't know that for sure, but that's what it usually is understood by reporters. Once Tressel was asked, how many chances did you give Ray Small before the Rose Bowl? And he said, more than LeBron takes shots. So, you know, there was that going on, and he left a college preparatory school here in Cleveland to go back to Glenville, the public school power, because he could get the same scholarship to Ohio State and really didn't have to prepare for college and work there. So, you know, he's been a trimmer sort of all of his life, but I do believe some of what he says about the cars. I think that kind of stuff goes on at a lot of places. But now that Ohio State has made such a misstep and brought in the NCAA into Woody Hayes Center, things like this are going to keep popping up.
All right, Bruce, your take on what, if anything, changes with this story today?
Well, I think Bill makes some fair points about Ray Small. I do think, though, that it's a leap to insinuate that recreational drug use is there. Ray had a lot of grade problems as well. But the interesting thing that I find in this, Bob, is the use of the term brotherhood by members of the Ohio State football team, as if they're not discrediting what the guy says. They're discrediting his right to say it because, hey, you're in the boys' club, and if we've got a sweet deal going on, how dare you betray that? I mean, I think people should be troubled by the fact that there's this culture of silence at Ohio State. And really, I could spin that, you know, the other way and say guys who don't speak up are guys who haven't fallen out of the system, guys whose business income, if they're not NFL players, depends on them staying in Columbus, Ohio, and depends on them kind of going along to get along. It's just as much an indictment of Ohio State that there's this quote-unquote brotherhood, and you don't dare talk about how things are done there. I mean, it's basically going to come down to the fact Ohio State has an opportunity here to either right its ship and try to start winning the right way and standing for the things that Jim Tressel always says he has stood for, or they can continue to go along and win 9 out of 10 against Michigan. But 4 of those wins have come with players like Troy Smith, Terrell Pryor, and Maurice Clarett in violation of NCAA rules. So do they really care about doing things the right way, or do they just care about the image behind the sweater vest?
Well, then there is this. The comments from Gene Smith back in December when they confronted the original NCAA issue and talking about just the 5 original players. This is the athletic director speaking and saying there are no other NCAA violations around this case. We're very fortunate that we do not have a systemic problem in our program. This is isolated to these young men and isolated to this particular instance, end quote. Now, stipulating, Bruce, certainly the issues of whether there are credibility questions in the personal history of Ray Smalley. This could be problematic for the athletic director.
Yeah, and Bob, when Gene Smith said that, do you know who was seated at his immediate right?
Jim Tressel.
His head football coach, Jim Tressel, a guy who at that time had exchanged 12 emails in April with a attorney in town telling him chapter and verse about every single one of those violations by those players, who had had private telephone conversations and text messages with Terrell Pryor's quote-unquote mentor And Jim Tressel sat there and listened to his athletic director say that and never said a word. Now, his contract with Ohio State requires him to be truthful about any violations that he knows of in his program. Ohio State, I assume, takes that clause in his contract pretty seriously since they underlined it in his contract. Yet he is still the coach, and not only is
under
he
the
still the
5-game
coach,
suspension, and we wait to see what happens.
But they continue to support him as Gene Smith did last week.
At this point.